So here's a little project, my wood vise that I put on my workbench I've been needing for a while. Just wanted to share this video with you guys. A few ideas I had. I took some 5/8" thread rod that I had laying around. I bought some tension pins and some 10" carriage bolts where I cut off the threads of the carriage bolt. As you can see, I grinded them down. Rounded over the end of it for a smooth handle. And basically I split the thread rod with a grinding wheel, drilled holes through the carriage bolt and the thread rod to put in the tension pin to give it a hinge action. And I had to round over the edges of it so that it would move back and forth pretty freely without binding up. So my idea was to take some washers and drill some holes in them so I could mount them to the back of the workbench after I took some 5/8" nuts and put them, welded those onto those washers like this. So basically that's going to sit in the back of the workbench. The thread rod is going to go through it and it'll be mounted with screws to hold it in place. So here's my little welder. I've got a little 110 Millermatic. Had some issues welding on it, which you'll see here in a little bit. Basically, yeah, just take the thread rod, threw it in the vise, and took a grinder and split it in the middle so that I could grind down the carriage bolt and it would fit in this split that I make inside of the thread rod. So there's my thread rod, been ground down, and there's one already finished. As you can see, that front washer is smaller than the back washers, so it would not have any play around the thread rod in the front. And I wanted to clean it up a little bit, and I hit the edge of it with the grinder, and it gave it a pretty cool look where the threads were not all there, but it turned out to look pretty cool. So like I said, I took the carriage bolts to the chop saw and cut the end of it off where the threads were, because I got 10" carriage bolts and they turned out to be a little long, so I just went ahead and cut them off, and the end of it right here will be ground down thin enough so they would slide into the slot of the thread rod, and then the hole will be drilled through it and the thread rod and the tension pin hammered in there, and it worked out really nice. Took a while to grind this down, but those carriage bolts are pretty heavy duty steel, and there's the two different size washers, one for the back, one for the front. So my boards are 20" wood pine boards, and my workbench has a little lip on it, so I had to take my router and use a flush bit and clean it out so it would sit just right up against the workbench and have an even platform there, because later on I want to put me some dogs in and have a set of dogs on the table and the wood vise as well. So there it is, kind of cleaned up a little bit, and here you can see I've got it mounted to the workbench with some heavy duty external screws or exterior screws. And there's the pine boards. The bolts in the back, the washer and bolt mount is not installed yet. That's just kind of what it's going to look like. So to get my nut mounted onto, welded onto my washer, I used that's a hard drive magnet, and that holds it into place really well, so I can have a stable welding surface. So basically, before I welded it, I kind of had to grind it down the surface with that zinc to make sure I got a good weld. So here you can see I'm also cleaning up the nut, so when I weld it, I'll have a good surface to weld to. And I made a little mistake on my welder. I had it turned down to the lowest wire gauge setting there was, and my first weld just did not take it all, because it was just that nut and that washer pretty thick. So I welded it and had to go back and clean it up and re-weld it, so they didn't look too pretty. That's kind of what happened after I welded it. But just hit it with the grinder and go back at it with the welder. Cost me a little bit of a time, but still, they don't have to be pretty. They're going to be sitting on the back side. They're going to be on the back side of the workbench underneath of it, and never will see them. But I did kind of clean it up to make them look halfway decent. So there it is, the washer weld onto the bolt. Made sure that it's still screwed through there. And there they are, semi cleaned up. And so they were taken to the back of the workbench and just mounted with some screws, so that would keep the thread rod in place and stable. It was a little bit of pain getting under there, especially drilling through those connectors for my wood bench. So after the handles are done and the boards are mounted to the bench, I kind of just hit it with a sander to round over the edges, make it smooth. And all my stuff like this that I do, I like sealing it with some just normal deck sealer. It gives it kind of a rich look, and I know it's nothing fancy, but I think it's going to do the job, and it's already served me well in a couple projects that I had. But just sealing it up, when you spill something on it, oil or something, it'll clean right up, and it'll protect that wood and seal it, keep it from splitting out, because it is pine and it's soft. And I chose pine because it wouldn't be too hard on anything that I put in there. The good thing about this wood vise is that both ends can be kind of offset, so you could put different size wood in there, as you'll see here in a minute. So yeah, there is a lot of action, a lot of turns that have to make, but these bolts, they kind of just slide up there real quick. And here's kind of what I was talking about. This is a raw piece of walnut board. It's still got the bark on the end of it, but by having the two handles offset, I can put more torque on one side if it's an uneven piece of wood. And as you can see, it holds it in place really well. Or you can get in and work on something like this, and with an uneven board. And this is another advantage of this wood bench that I needed for a couple other things that I've done, is being able to stand a big piece up like this, and work on it like that as well, because the offset of the two thread rods are 14 inches apart. And here's the another instance where this thing come in super handy. This wheel, the steel wheel, I need to clean it up because I'm restoring an old bike, and I could put it in this vise and scrub it down. So there it is. Hope you got some good ideas, and got any comments, just leave them in there. That's my wood vise project.